In this video, we'll explore the incredible story of Jonah. The story of Jonah helps us see the vast difference between human perspective and divine compassion. It challenges us to consider the value God places on all human life, even those considered enemies. It highlights themes of divine calling, human resistance, the power of repentance, and the boundless nature of God's mercy. The book of Jonah begins with a divine command. The word of the Lord came to Jonah son of Amittai, instructing him to go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness had come before God. Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, was known for its cruelty and was an enemy of Israel. This made God's command particularly challenging for Jonah, an Israelite prophet. However, Jonah's immediate response was rebellion. Instead of heading east to Nineveh, he fled westward, attempting to escape from the Lord's presence. He went down to Joppa, a port city, where he found a ship bound for Tarshish. After paying the fare, he boarded the vessel, hoping to sail as far away from God's calling as possible. But the Lord was not to be outrun. He sent a powerful wind over the sea, causing such a violent storm that the ship threatened to break apart. The sailors, each crying out to his own God, were terrified. They began throwing cargo overboard to lighten the ship. Meanwhile, Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain discovered Jonah and woke him, urging him to call on his God for help. The sailors, desperate to know why this calamity had fallen upon them, cast lots to determine who was responsible. The lot fell on Jonah. Questioned by the crew, Jonah confessed that he was running from the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. This revelation terrified the sailors even more. They asked Jonah what they should do to him to calm the sea. Jonah, knowing he was the cause of their distress, told them to throw him overboard. The sailors, showing remarkable compassion, initially resisted this idea. They tried rowing back to land, but the sea grew even wilder. Finally, seeing no alternative, they cried out to Jonah's God, asking not to be held accountable for taking Jonah's life. Then they threw Jonah overboard, and immediately the sea grew calm. Witnessing this, the sailors were awestruck. They offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. God's plan for Jonah, however, was far from over. The Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and the prophet remained in its belly for 3 days and 3 nights. This extraordinary event served as a turning point in Jonah's journey. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. His prayer, recorded in chapter 2, was a mix of desperation, repentance, and praise. Jonah acknowledged that in his distress, he called to the Lord, and God answered him. He described his near-death experience, saying, "The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head." Yet, even in this dire situation, Jonah's faith resurged. He declared, "When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple." Jonah's prayer concluded with a commitment to fulfillment and an acknowledgement of God's salvation. He stated, "But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord." Upon hearing this prayer of repentance and recommitment, the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. With Jonah back on solid ground, God issued his command a second time. "Go to Nineveh and proclaim the message I give you." This time, Jonah obeyed. He journeyed to Nineveh, an enormously large city that took 3 days to go through. Jonah entered the city and began his proclamation. 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown." The response of the Ninevites was astounding. They believed God's message delivered through Jonah. In an extraordinary display of repentance, they declared a fast, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. News of this reached the king of Nineveh, who rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. The king then issued a decree throughout Nineveh. He ordered that people and animals be covered with sackcloth, Everyone was to call urgently on God and give up their evil ways and violence. The king expressed hope, saying, "Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish." God saw their repentance, how they turned from their evil ways, and he had compassion on them. He relented and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. This divine response demonstrated God's mercy and willingness to forgive even those considered enemies of his people. However, Jonah's reaction to this turn of events was surprising and troubling. He became angry at God's compassion towards Nineveh. In his frustration, Jonah prayed to the Lord, saying, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." Jonah was so distressed that he asked God to take his life, claiming it would be better for him to die than to live. The Lord responded with a gentle rebuke in the form of a question. "Is it right for you to be angry?" God, in his patience and desire to teach Jonah, provided an object lesson. He caused a leafy plant to grow up over Jonah, providing shade and relieving his discomfort. Jonah was very happy about the plant. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. Once again, Jonah wished for death, saying it would be better for him to die than to live. God then asked Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" Jonah insisted that it was even to the point of death. Then came God's powerful conclusion to the narrative. The Lord said, "You have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals?" The story of Jonah serves not only as a historical account but also as a powerful allegory, illustrating God's concern for all nations and his desire for his people to share in his mission of redemption. It remained a potent reminder of the struggles between human prejudice and divine love, between limited understanding and God's wisdom.